And we're going to talk about the pagan roots of democracy. So remember that democracy begins in ancient Greece. In ancient Greece, in particular in the city-states, particularly Athens. And this is in the 6th to 5th century BC. This is where democracy first emerges. It first begins. Now, there is some evidence, some very scant evidence, that democracy or democratic systems existed in Mesopotamia, particularly in Sumer and a few of the other ancient Mesopotamian cultures. And this is known as primitive democracy. It certainly was not nearly as refined as what we see in ancient Greece. And there's really scant evidence of that. So I won't go into that too much. That's something we'll say for another time. But really, for our purposes, the history of democracy really begins with most historians in the 6th and 5th century BC. And we would talk about ancient Greece. And by the way, when ancient Greece formed its democracy, it came after, interestingly enough, a period known as the Greek Dark Ages. There was a period of the Dark Ages, and then there was the overthrow of the king, and then there was the implementation of democracy. So it looks almost exactly, kind of like what we see when it revives later. So there's a period of Dark Ages in Greece, then the king is toppled, and then the rebellion, of course, and the uprising leads to democracy. Solon is one of the key players here in ancient Greece. He was democratically elected a leader in 594 BC in Athens. He penned the world's first constitution, and in fact, many of the people who give Moses credit for the Constitution of the United States hardly ever say anything about Solon. And Solon is really I would say, the primary influence for the Constitution, much more so than Moses. And so Solon penned the Western world's first Constitution. Solon gave the right for all men to bear arms. I mean, this is where the Second Amendment kind of comes from. Solon, under him, the will of the people really prevailed. But he was kind of early. The development here was early. It really accelerates. Democracy really accelerates underneath a gentleman by the name of Cleisthenes. He was the one who really created the first democratic government of the people, by the people, for the people. That was in the year 507, after a really 508 BC, somewhere in there, right after a really big uprising and rebellion. Again, another really big rebellion that comes right before this. And so this becomes really the first democracy in world history. And then you have the age of Pericles. Pericles lived in the 5th century BC. He was an Athenian statesman. He was very responsible for the growth of Athenian democracy, and then, of course, its later slippage into empire. But he was really best known for the building programs that went on the Acropolis, right? So he was really well known for this. Another thing that he's well known for is the funeral oration that he gives early in the Peloponnesian War, according to the historian Thucydides. I'll just give you a little quote here of what Pericles is reported to have said, according to Thucydides, who was the historian, the Greek historian who writes about this. And this is Pericles speaking in 430 BC. It says, "Our constitution does not copy the laws of neighboring states. We are rather a pattern to others than imitators ourselves. Its administration," he continues, "favors the many instead of the few. This is why it's called a democracy." So he actually calls the word what it is, democracy, demokratia in the ancient Greek. "We throw open our city to the world and never by alien acts exclude foreigners from any opportunity of learning or observing, although the eyes of an enemy may occasionally profit by our liberality. At Athens, we live exactly as we please, and yet are just as ready to encounter every legitimate danger." Again, referring to this idea of living exactly as we please. Is that what we see in the Bible? Is that what the Bible tells us to do? To live exactly as we please? Is that how the ancient Israel government was set up, so everybody could do exactly as they please? This is something that's unique to democracy, that sees that people want to pursue their own self-interest. They want their will to be expressed. Pericles is very clear in what kind of system is going on in ancient Athens. Now, this is an interesting image here, this marble image, circa 336 BC or so. And what you see here is the goddess Democratia. Democracy is actually a goddess. As we go back and look at ancient Athens or ancient Rome, we find, or even before that, we find that these concepts were related to gods or goddesses. And so Democratia here, you see a picture of her. She's crowning Demos. He represents the people. She's crowning Demos. So the people are being crowned here, old man Demos, by Democratia, this woman. Now, when we look at the name of the woman who represented liberty in Greece, her name was Eleutheria. This is the word that's even in the Greek New Testament for the word liberty, how it talks about how these false teachers promise liberty, but they themselves are slaves. This is the idea. This is the goddess of liberty, and she is the one who provides liberty to the people, right? Now, one thing to keep in mind as we look at these pictures of these ancient gods from Greece and Rome is to remember what the Bible says about these gods. Here's what it says in Psalm 96:5. I think this is the New King James. It says, "For all the gods of the nations are idols, but the Lord made the heavens." When we take a look at the Septuagint translation, it says, "For all the gods of the heathen are devils, but the Lord made the heavens." Then there's also the Douay Rheims version, which tells us, "For all the gods of the Gentiles are devils, but the Lord made the heavens." So what we're saying here is the Bible is calling out these ancient gods. It's calling out these ancient goddesses for what they are. They're not God. They're not the creator God. They're not related to Jesus Christ in any way, shape, or form. These are devils. These are demons. They are not what they appear, right? And yet they receive adoration. They receive veneration. All of these gods that we're seeing of the Gentiles, which Greece and Rome were certainly Gentiles, their gods are devils. This is what the book of Psalms tells us. Okay, so let's continue on. That was Greece. Let's continue on now. Democracy begins its slow, steady march from the time of Athens into the Roman Republic. The Roman Republic was also democratically based. This begins in 509 BC, so around the same time, very interestingly. And it began, just like in Greece, it began with a rebellious uprising and overthrow of a king. It always involved sedition, every single time. And this is why Plato despised it. This is why Socrates didn't have anything kind to say about it. And this is why Aristotle struggled with it, because it really was a seditious kind of government that would thwart existing governments. And so now you have Athenian democracy and you have Roman representative government, which kind of refines the Athenian democracy. So you have these Greco-Roman philosophies and values and beliefs and traditions that are really kind of being born during this time. Now, in Rome, the woman who represents liberty is not the one we saw earlier. It's actually Libertas. Here is a denare from 42 BC in Rome. And you'll see a picture here of Libertas, who was the Roman goddess of liberty. She's the female personification of liberty and freedom. She actually had her own temple on Aventine Hill in one of the 7 hills of ancient Rome. So Libertas was certainly worshipped, and there were sacrifices made to her. So Libertas, again, one of these goddesses or gods that the Bible says are devils, right? If they're of the Gentiles, they're devils. They're not real gods. They're devils.